I'm delighted to introduce to you Doug Purcell. He is a student and apprentice of mine from Canada. Thank you, Doug, for taking the time to participate in our event today.
Yeah, thanks, Lama, for having me. It's going to be interesting and fun to discuss our topics.
Absolutely. Yeah, you've been around the block a few times and you've studied various styles of healing and meditation and Qigong. Can you give us a brief description of your journey, how you got involved with Qigong and what brought you into these arts?
Yeah, it was an interesting beginning. I met a Buddhist nun at a retreat at a center near Humboldt, is where it's a abbey type setting. And of course, it was Buddha style, Vipassana type style meditation. And then she was a nun from Hawaii, and she discussed the benefits of Qigong. And then I began a search for a teacher of that, and it's a lot rarer than yoga in these parts and maybe around the world, but I really liked some of the stuff that she had shown us, and it was more standing and more moving upright and like how we walk around and that kind of stuff. So I looked for a long time before I found somebody to teach me, and then I found a center by Search and Healing and into the medical Qigong with Zen Wellness out of Phoenix. And then when I got into their intermediate styles, I didn't take to that. And so I looked even further, and this is where I discovered you. And I discovered the art of Qi Dao. And when we talked about leading into like a moving meditation and dynamic meditation versus just seated like in Vipassana, I found that most excellent. In fact, I used to do that in my living room when I went, what's really this? You know, if you're good thing nobody's watching, you know, like dance like nobody's watching type thing. And
Right.
And so when you introduced this, I think that was in the intermediate part. It's a back a ways now. And I just went, wow, you know, you start out with that seaweed meditation, and I really liked that flow because I felt I started to connect to the heaven energy as well, or the sky energy, as well as being rooted but still flexible. And so that's the flexibility I was looking for in my life, because my body was, you know, was pretty agile when I was younger in sports and all that. And then I had a few sports injuries, and as I discovered with you, what the result of that was, I developed a holding out pattern, and how that affected my body. When I read that in your book in the intro stuff, I went, oh, that's me. And a chiropractor had said it's kind of like a style of a type of scoliosis. I've ever been diagnosed with that.
Right.
When you revealed to me it's not scoliosis at all, because you got the background to make that call. Through you, I developed the skill set to clear my hip pain to a great degree, because as you know, with me, it's the right side going back like this, and as healing hip pain. And I noticed if I did yoga 2 or 3 times a week, it took care of things as well. But you fall off the yoga wagon, because I was looking for something different, for more particular to me, and that's when your style of Qigong really nailed it home. And as you know, more recently, I just developed pain in my shoulder while I was doing a certain exercise, and then we discovered, well, you pointed it back out to me, which is, I guess, why you have a teacher. No guessing, but I did realize I was curving the shoulder in, my right shoulder in, and starting to hold back in life a little bit again. What's going on? Why ain't I progressing through when before it was easier? And so I'm back on that track to one discussion that we had a little while back now.
Isn't it interesting how the body reveals what's going on in the mind, even in the subconscious mind?
Mm.
that often we wouldn't be able to tell so easily if we just asked the person, well, what's going on with you? And they would be like, nothing's going on. What are you talking about? But
Yeah.
if you look at the body, you can immediately tell. It's almost like mind reading. And that speaks also about flexibility. You just mentioned that you used to be more flexible when you were younger. And what do you think is the purpose of being flexible in your body and also in your mind and spirit?
The purpose to me is that it allows me to flow much, much, much easier with life. And life
Mm,
throws you some curves and some obstacles to deal with, sometimes on a regular basis or a semi-regular basis. But it just allows me to adapt in the moment and not get too excited about it or explosive, like in somebody. I notice where it really makes a difference is in traffic. Is seems to be a good test for a lot of people, myself included. So it's just like a much gentler response to being cut off or not knowing somebody else's world, and it's also deepened my compassion uh,
mm,
for life, and it allows me to be more grounded, even if that makes sense. Like a lot of
sure.
meditations, and it leads me into the flexibility of with my meditation. Even like sometimes I can just sit there like in a Vipassana style and or else use a word as a mantra, and that is quite settling for the mind, and that's all that's needed in that moment. But I also realize that the mind needs movement and some direction sometimes, and so I find the what I learned in Qigong was to bring movement into it, which allowed me to the flexibility of connecting to the Shen or the upper realms of stuff where I could easily spend all of my time. And
Mm.
but I realized if I wanted to get to the depths of even the heavens, I needed to ground my body on earth as well.
That's a really good point. And it would be probably fair to say that people who experience greater physical flexibility also find it easier to experience more mental flexibility and vice versa. In other words, mental and physical flexibilities often go hand in hand. Which comes first? It can be debated, but
Mm.
it's definitely something that we can see how when the person, for example, is holding tension, they
Mm.
become less grounded, like you said. They can become less flexible. And in general, tension is a result of central nervous system being agitated and sending more signals of contraction. Muscles are not stupid to just hold tension for no reason. They have to receive the signal to contract. And that basically explains why mind and body are so thoroughly integrated. Now, when we look at the practice that you just said helped you overcome some challenges, any particular challenges that you would care to reveal or share with us that you managed to overcome with the help of these practices?
Well, with the help of these practices is that I can say to a great degree that I'm happy now. That that it's still a work in progress. Not every day is right there, but I would say a majority of my days are. I would lean into joyfulness, and
Wonderful.
and it's exciting. I find like, oh, why am I happy today? And then it came to me one day when I was just laying in bed when I first wake up that why do you need a particular reason? Perhaps that's just the flow that's here. And
Yeah, defaulting to joy.
yeah, defaulting to joy. And so it's nice to get to a space where you read about or you might have contemplated about what is joy. And then when
Mm,
you discover it, it's like, okay, now how do I put this down on paper? Which, you know, it, it's just a practice, and I would say people notice, and you give off this ambience that invites more, like synchronicity things like I walked to the grocery store and it started to snow and rain as it does here, and I was offered a ride home in a vehicle I was dreaming of purchasing. You know, the exact same thing, except it was a RAV4 hybrid, and I hadn't put hybrid down on my dream paper. So it's now added. So things like that, and a lot of things happen, and people gifting me things. You know, sometimes it's not much. It's like pay me extra for my sessions, or I go to visit somebody and they gift me a couple dozen eggs. You know, things along that nature. And now my tree is injured, but it's gifted me birch sap. You know,
That's right.
so yeah, as you gave me a tip on, so there's lots of little things along that nature, and I seem really much more collected than I used to be. Like all these thoughts were here, but let there be a pocket of it over here and a pocket over there, and you have to tap into it, but then you couldn't sustain it, or you would skip to another. Some people might call that ADHD or ADD, but I never called it that. But you know, I never got diagnosed either. But what it does for me now is allow me to remain a lot more present, and that's the cool thing about dynamic meditation. I'm finding is that I get to stay present in the movement and stay connected to both. And I still do a standing practice where I ground to, you know, a shamanic practice with grounding with the rings and all that kind of stuff. But it's just a technique, but it's the pinnacle grounding factor is joy, I find.
Marvelous. Well, and you obviously mentioned also that you had a dream about a particular car that you were hoping to purchase, and you even created a dream list of qualities that you were looking for in a vehicle. And obviously, that is, in most people's minds, different from being present. But we learn in our studies that being present and dreaming are not two contradictory ways of being. You actually can be in a dream and you can be present in it.
Yeah.
It's something that the meditation can evolve into. That's one of my primary objectives, is to bring this approach to meditation to more people so that more people would be able to live their lives like they're living in a dream and live lucidly, live awake to the true nature of what's going on. Now, would you tell us a little bit about why it's important to realize when you're dreaming, for example, the dreaming practices that we do during the sleep at night?
I would say it's not just to pay attention to dive into our dreams so that we become lucid and more interactive, giving our choices in our night dream and understanding them more, because we have the much freedom. We don't have this physical body to dance around with, and it's just a much freer space. And that said, I feel the one that needs to be explored just as much, if not more, is the daydream, because there's much more going on around us than we could ever imagine. And that perhaps maybe what's bringing joy to the forefront is that there's a process of discovery here to be done, and that's what I hope to explore with you next as well, because it's the next segment in the apprentice program. And there's something dynamic there for me to discover, I know. But it's like bringing more truth to my life about what we don't see around us and what's really going on energetically that can even add to the flow even more, and then it exists. You kind of you can exist in flow 24/7 as one of the popular things to talk about these days, or workforces 24/7 and all that kind of stuff.
That's being practiced 24/7 is the real spirituality, and not just something pertaining to spirituality that we do once a week on Sunday,
Yeah.
but actually engaging in spiritual practices pretty much nonstop. And that's exactly what the practice of dream yoga allows us to. And as you pointed it out quite correctly, that the practice of lucidity in our daydreams is an excellent entry point into this realm of studies, which is probably the most important thing of all of them. It's to learn how we basically create our own reality in our dreaming mind during the day. So what we perceive is one thing, but then how we perceive it and how we filter that perception and how we understand what we are dealing with, and then how we also daydreaming about the past or the future. That takes up tremendous amount of energy. And it also is a great opportunity to practice energy awareness, because everything is made of energy in dreams. So might as well put the energy awareness to good use, right?
Right, right.
Oh, what about some more energy awareness practices? For example, in Chinese Qigong, they talk about the three dantians. In Indian yoga, they talk about chakras. Now, what do you think? Why is the reason why some people focus on the dantians and then further go into the chakra system? What does it do for the practitioners?
I found where I started out with studying the chakra systems, and then I went into the three dantians more in a deeper way. But then I brought it back to the chakras again, and the three dantians take in the chakra systems anyways. But the studying the three dantians brought me where I was kind of not flowing in my life, and it discovered that I was weak in my earth, and that I needed to improve my storage of qi and my earthliness, because the shen part comes pretty easy. And then I lead a more balanced collective life, and people are noticing what going back into the chakra system is doing for me right now is allowing to me to be even more pacific. Like, is break it down even deeper.
Yeah, and obviously it's a little bit more granular way of understanding energy centers as compared to just three dantians.
Yes.
Well, and when we develop this deeper understanding, obviously we also can apply more precise ways to fine tune our energy alignments, and also how physically we are in alignment with our energy field. So that obviously is a major part of our studies. About the flow, obviously when we are in alignment with our energy field, we become relaxed. When we become relaxed, it's a lot easier to feel the subtle energy currents as compared to when you're tense.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty obvious reason to learn how to be relaxed so that you can be in the flow.
Yeah, I would say this nervous jitter to my energy, even though it'd be flowing nicely, there's still this, what's that back in the background? And by diving into Pacific areas in the body, even more Pacific than the large chakras, because there's minor ones, and even delving into the Pacific of even a particular cell, and getting it down to that fine point of detail when you work with yourself, even with some people. I found that quite rewarding to move that. I think that nervous energy is in the process of transcending into that joyous energy. So I guess it's an overall spiritual feel, like you had said earlier. Like, it's the whole package. It's becoming the whole package and not just part of the package.
And as you mentioned that you work with other people, would you share with our viewers a little bit about the type of work that you do and how they might be able to benefit from your offerings?
Well, most of my clients tend to be the intuitive type that have just got their third eye open a little too much, or is dancing around in the Shen category. And then I also work with healers like myself and help them help them release what they shouldn't be carrying, and people that coach people in those realms as well. And I tend to work on intuitives, healers, and coaches that have a spiritual lean, and it's getting to be a deeper lean, like getting to be more Pacific. And it's about right now it's mostly women that I work with because they seem to open easier, they're more open. But I'm interesting, started working with a couple guys, quite interesting, which is exciting to work with men, you know. So that, and so I help people with meditation, but it's mostly them being present in their body, like I've learned to be, and to learn to be more specific in what they want out of their life, which I've learned to do as well. And it also led me into breath challenges from such a ages such as 6 months old, to that you carry this kind of energy forward. And so I've learned how to be pacific with certain ailments that I used to work through, like bronchitis, like every other year, every 3-4 years on a regular basis. Like it was just a repeating pattern. And I don't have that anymore. So I can help people with those specific conditions quite easily.
How would our viewers perhaps be able to experience a little bit of your work or practices? Is this something that you might be able to guide us through in just a few minutes?
Wow, that's put me on the spot.
Mentioned breathing and respiration. Perhaps is something that you might be able to offer as a kind of a brief breathing practice? And why is it important to breathe properly, and what does it do for your body?
Sure. I'll take you to one of the thing I used to teach a lot of Reiki students back in the day. It is just a one-word mantra that focuses on the middle dantian, or the fourth chakra, which is omnipresent, like the heart chakra. And I find it was one of the first things that could free the energy in my chest and loosen the tightness. And it's not a challenge like you might hear in some practices. Like I got a little gift here from a Buddhist friend, and he goes with the word ah. And in the practice I came across, it's a little bit more of a yang focus when it says the word ha. And it's called the ha meditation. In the beginning, all you really need to do is say the word ha, and it's not to challenge the breath. It's not you're the only person you're competing with. If you are the competitive nature, then you would just do the word ha. And you can go from a few seconds, and after you can go up to 40-45 seconds with an easy enough practice. So I take all of my students through this, and people that need opening in this center but think too much about the practice. So that's what I will lead you in. So I just basically ask people to close their eyes, but you can also meditate with your eyes open, which I also invite you to do, or you can go halfway, like some of the yogis you see, so they can walk both worlds. And so I know you know how to do all three. And so we'll just take the best in breath we can without forcing it. So you just breathe in, and then ha, and then just let it fall away. And that can deepen. After a while, you can get into a deep ha, but at first, just do it lightly. So breathe in again. Ha. And then it can gradually lengthen. But sometimes with some students I've found, or in some clients, that they need a target. Like the mind needs a target. So if most people breathe shallow, and lots of people breathe through their mouth, actually more like maybe 50-50. When we need to alternate our breath with the nostrils eventually, which it switches naturally. But getting back to the ha breath, ha, if you can see, I'm putting my hand on my chest, and then if I'm chest breathing, I can pinpoint, let's say, my third chakra, the upper part of the lower dantian. And then if I want to go deeper, I can touch the below the navel and give the energy a target. And that seems to help those people that, oh, I can't go any deeper, and they just go beyond the point of where you feel the vibration. And it all comes into play, and it just seems to me an easy way to begin to breathe, and I still go back to that at times.
That's a great practice. And as a matter of fact, mantra ha is the primary mantra in Qigong. So I'm glad that you brought it up. And as you may know by now, that mantra ha may also be pronounced in different ways depending on different holding patterns that you have in your body. And so if you hold down, for example, your mantra ha will be more like this, ha, as opposed to when you hold up, mantra ha will be like this, ha, as opposed to holding forth, for example, your mantra ha will be like, ha.
Yeah.
Versus, for instance, holding back, it would be kind of held back, ha. So the mantra ha may actually be also a mantra that allows you to connect and reveal some of your holding patterns. And it can affect other people's holding patterns as well. So we may even be able to use the mantra ha in a variety of ways to connect with the other person's holding pattern, to the other person's energy center or chakra associated with that holding pattern, and allow them to become aware of how much they're actually using that particular energy center, or how much they're holding themselves in a certain way, so that they can exercise the freedom of choice, whether to keep doing that once they become aware of it, or to exercise freedom of choice to do something else. And that's something that obviously gives the person a lot greater sense of self-agency, because by and large, people who have greater sense of freedom of choice also experience greater happiness.
Yeah, I guess that's part of what the joy is about. Now that you've pointed to that, is I have a greater freedom of choice. What particular thing I want to do, and part of my generalness led into every part of my life, and being like a broader scope, and then through working with people like yourself, it has nurtured a deepening into I can be pacific, and I can focus my thoughts on point and or on target, and still have the flexibility to open it back up, just like you've dreamed of doing, like speaking of dreaming. But yeah.
To wrap up our interview today, let me ask you, Doug, how our viewers would be able to connect with you if they want to take advantage of your services.
Well, right now, I took my website down because everything's changing and it's going more Pacific. And so that's what I'm learning and may develop with you in the future. Right now, it's just contact me on Facebook. I've got a page, a group called Radiant Spirit, and my name is Douglas Purcell, so they could just private message me, I guess, for texting and all that kind of stuff. So that's the best way right now.
Need to make sure that your website is up and running. And I will definitely encourage our viewers to connect with Doug. He is a wonderful healer. And if you are in Canada, especially, do make sure to connect with him. Thank you, Doug. It's been a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you, Lama.